Hi, this is Matt Baker. Today I'm going to show you the family tree of Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States. We have done his family previously, but since he's running for president again and is in the news a lot, I thought it would be a good opportunity to update and expand his chart. Let's start with the surname Trump, which is related to the words trumpet and drum. These words in turn go back to the word triumph, which in Roman times referred to a special type of victory parade. For many years, Donald Trump claimed that his paternal ancestors came from Sweden. In fact, this is what he stated in his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal. However, we now know that his paternal ancestors actually came from Germany, from a small town in Bavaria called Karlstadt. It was there that his great-great-grandfather, Johann Paul Trump, lived. Interestingly, Johann Paul Trump is also an ancestor of the Heinz family, known for their famous ketchup. You see, Johann Paul's daughter Charlotte married a Heinz, and her son John immigrated to the U.S., where his son Henry went on to found the Heinz Ketchup Company. But we're more concerned with Johann Paul's son, Johannes, who had a son named Christian, who married Katharina Kober. They were the parents of Friedrich, who at the young age of 16 moved to the United States in order to escape military service in Germany. He initially worked in New York as a barber, but then in 1891 moved to Seattle, which at the time was still a frontier town. There he bought and ran a bar, which also operated as a brothel. Several years later, during the Klondike Gold Rush, he moved up to the Yukon, where he continued to sell liquor and access to prostitutes, becoming rich in the process. Then in 1901, he ended up back in his hometown in Germany, which is where he met Elizabeth Christ. They married the next year and initially moved to New York, but then back to Bavaria, where they decided to settle. However, when the Bavarian government found out that Friedrich had been a draft dodger, they banished him from the country. So the couple had to settle in New York after all, which is where their 3 children were born. In New York, Friedrich invested his ill-gotten gains from out west into real estate. But then in 1918, at the age of 49, he mysteriously dropped dead. His family would later learn that he was one of the first cases of the Spanish flu, which went on to become the deadliest pandemic in history. During the 1920s, Elizabeth continued to run the family business under the name E. Trump, and then later E. Trump and Son, that son being her eldest, Fred Trump. Her other son, John Trump, instead went on to become a scientist at MIT. I'll come back to John Trump a little later. For now, I want to point out Betty Trump, Fred and John's older sister. She married a William Walter and had a son named John Walter, who became the mayor of a small village on Long Island. Fred, however, is the one that we're most interested in, being that he was the father of Donald Trump. Once he turned 21, he basically took over the family business, eventually marrying Mary Ann McLeod, whose family I'll talk about a bit later. But like both his father and his son, Fred Trump is a controversial figure, known for his questionable business practices. But before I get into it, let me say up front, talking about the Trump family is difficult. Former President Donald Trump is by far one of the most controversial figures of our time. Just last week, he was found guilty in a New York court on 34 felony charges. Reactions in the wake of this continue to be nothing short of polarizing. This is why I asked Ground News specifically to sponsor this video. Their platform combines all the world's news in one place so that you can compare coverage from across the political spectrum and verify that your information is factual. For example, when it came to the verdict on Trump's hush money trial, they aggregated over 600 articles. Taking a closer look, you can see that some of the headlines quoted Trump saying that the trial was rigged, while others emphasized the weight of a felony conviction. So it's obvious that depending on where you get your information from, you can end up having a totally different perspective. This is why Ground News is one of my most used apps. Look, you know that I love charts. Well, this app shows me charts like this one and additional data on each news source, like where their funding comes from, which can heavily influence the way a story is spun. It even highlights what isn't being widely covered. Thus, it can help you have more productive conversations with family and friends on contentious topics, like the Trumps. So, with a major election approaching, Ground News is a tool that we all need. You can check it out now by going to ground.news/charts or by using the link in the description or pinned comment. Subscribe through my channel this month and you will save 40% off unlimited access to their Vantage plan. Ground News is supported by their subscribers, and supporting them directly supports my work as well. So check them out using the link. Thank you, Ground News. Okay, back to the Trump family. It was during World War II that Fred Trump started telling people that he was Swedish instead of German, since Germans were, for obvious reasons, very unpopular in those days. It was also during the war that Fred Trump started to make really big money by using federal subsidies to build housing for naval shipyard workers, and then later for returning veterans. But pretty soon it became clear to the US government that Trump was making too much money and was making it too quickly. The feds investigated him twice and found out that basically what he would do is overestimate the cost of a project, get federal money for it, and then use the profit for other investments. Technically, this wasn't illegal, so he was never charged. However, he was later sued for racial discrimination, for supposedly going out of his way to avoid renting to blacks and other minorities. The folk singer Woody Guthrie even wrote a song about Fred called Old Man Trump. Anyhow, the case was eventually settled, with Trump's company agreeing to better follow the Fair Housing Act. Okay, let me now tell you about Donald Trump's mother and the MacLeod side of the family. They came from the Outer Hebrides, which are a group of islands that are a part of Scotland. The earliest Trump ancestor that we have a photo of is his great-grandfather Alexander MacLeod, son of a William MacLeod. He and his wife Annie were the parents of Malcolm MacLeod, who married Mary Ann Smith. As you can see from the photos, they were simple folk who worked as tenant farmers in order to eke out a living. They had 10 children, the youngest of whom was Mary Ann. Mary Ann, Donald Trump's mother, was born in Scotland and spoke Gaelic as her first language. But at age 18, she immigrated to the US, where a few years later, she met and married Fred Trump. Together, they had 5 children. The eldest, Mary Ann, worked as a lawyer and then eventually became a judge. In fact, she was appointed by Bill Clinton to the US Court of Appeals, which is just one step down from the Supreme Court. Donald's older brother, Fred Jr., was originally slated to take over the Trump business empire, but he opted to become a pilot instead. He unfortunately also became an alcoholic, and this contributed to his early death at age 42. He did, however, have 2 children, Fred Trump III and Mary Trump. Because Fred Jr. died before Fred Sr., these 2 children expected to receive their father's portion of the family wealth. However, they did not, which led to a lawsuit, at which point Donald Trump refused to help pay the medical bills for Fred III's son William, who was born with cerebral palsy. The suit was eventually settled, but the bad blood continued. To this day, Mary is one of Donald Trump's most vocal critics, having helped the New York Times with this article, and having published the book, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. Mary also happens to be the only openly gay close relative of Donald Trump. She and her ex-wife have 1 daughter together. Next up is Elizabeth Trump, Donald's only sibling that is currently still living. She generally stays out of the spotlight, but we do know that she's married to a James Grau, and that the couple has no children. Finally, there's Donald's younger brother, Robert, who passed away in 2020. Prior to this, he mostly worked for the family business. He married twice and had a stepson, but no children of his own. Which brings us to Donald Trump himself, the 4th child of Fred Sr., and the person who led the family business from 1971 to 2017. changing its name to the Trump Organization. From 2017 to 2021, he then, of course, served as the President of the United States. Trump has been married 3 times, his first wife being the late Ivana Zelničková, a former model from the Czech Republic. Together, they had 3 children, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. While still married to Ivana, Trump had an affair with a young beauty contestant named Marla Maples. Eventually, he divorced Ivana and married Marla, with whom he had his 4th child, Tiffany. That marriage lasted just 3 years, after which he started dating the Slovenian model Melania Knaz, who is 24 years his junior. They married in 2005 and have 1 son named Barron. When Trump became president, Melania became First Lady and is one of only 2 First Ladies to have been born outside the United States. Let me now tell you about Trump's children. Currently, Don Jr. and Eric share the leadership of the Trump Organization. For 13 years, Don Jr. was married to model Vanessa Hayden, who, prior to 9/11, had been dating a Saudi prince. Together, Don Jr. and Vanessa have 5 children, ranging in age from 17 to 10. Take note that his oldest son is named Donald, and is hence Donald Trump III. Currently, Don Jr. is engaged to former Fox News host Kimberly Guilfoyle, who has been married twice before, her first husband being Gavin Newsom, who is nowadays the governor of California. Take note that Kimberly is currently 55, which is 1 year older than her future mother-in-law, Melania Trump. One thing you may not know about Ivanka is that her legal name is actually Ivana, just like her mother. You see, in Slavic languages, Ivanka means something like little Ivana. Anyhow, she's married to Jared Kushner. During Trump's presidency, Jared served as senior advisor to the president, and Ivanka as advisor. This was seen as a conflict of interest, not only because they were close relatives of the president, but also because they both had businesses that benefited from their roles. Jared Kushner is the son of real estate developer Charles Kushner, who served time in prison for tax evasion and witness tampering. He in turn is the son of Holocaust survivor Ray Kushner. When she immigrated to the U.S., her husband took her last name, pretending to be her brother. If that hadn't have happened, Ivanka's surname would now be Berkowitz, not Kushner. Because she married into a Jewish family, Ivanka converted to Judaism as well, so that her children would be born Jewish. Currently, they have 3 children, Arabella, Joseph, and Theo. Eric is married to former TV producer Laura Yunaska, who is now the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. They have 2 children, aged 7 and 5. Take note that all of the photos that I've used for the Trump grandchildren were posted publicly on Instagram by their parents. Tiffany Trump, who is now 30, got married in 2022. Her husband is Michael Boulos, the son of the Lebanese billionaire Massan Boulos, who owns a major company in Nigeria. Finally, there's Barron Trump, who recently graduated from high school and has sprouted to a remarkable height of 6'7". And this is where I need to return to Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump. You see, there's a fun conspiracy theory that links John to Barron. Ever hear of Nikola Tesla? Well, Nikola Tesla also tried to invent a time machine. As far as we know, he never succeeded. But the key words are, as far as we know. What we do know is that when Tesla died in 1943, the person tasked with going through his lab and papers was none other than Professor John Trump. We also know that in 1893, a book was published called Barron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. This has led some to speculate that John Trump may have secretly discovered Tesla's time machine, and that Barron just might be a time traveler. Okay, that last bit is not meant to be taken seriously. Let me know in the comments what your prediction is for the upcoming election. And don't forget to sign up for Ground News by using the link in the description or pinned comment. Thanks for watching.